A young mother waited for the bus with her children until a millionaire changed her life. Do you love stories about love and overcoming challenges? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The rain fell relentlessly over the streets of Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, transforming the cobblestones into mirrors that reflected a grey sky. Harper Martin pulled her worn cardigan tighter around her shoulders, though it did little against the cold that seeped through the fabric. Beside her, 5-year-old Emma clutched a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing, while 3-year-old Noah pressed himself against his mother's legs, seeking warmth that Harper barely had to give. The bus stop offered little shelter. Water dripped through a crack in the plastic roof, creating a steady rhythm that matched Harper's exhausted heartbeat. She glanced at her watch, a gift from better days, and felt her stomach tighten. The bus was already 12 minutes late. 12 minutes that meant she might miss the beginning of her shift at the bakery. 12 minutes that could cost her the job she desperately needed to keep. "Mama, I'm cold," Emma whispered, her voice small against the sound of rain. Harper knelt down, ignoring the puddle that soaked through her jeans. She wrapped both children in her arms, creating a cocoon with her body. "I know, my love. The bus will come soon, and then we'll go to Madame Dubois' house. She promised to make hot chocolate." It was a lie born of love. Madame Dubois, their elderly neighbor who watched the children while Harper worked, could barely afford tea, let alone chocolate. But Emma's face brightened, and that small spark of hope was worth the guilt that twisted in Harper's chest. 3 years had passed since David left. 3 years since she'd found the note on the kitchen table of their tiny apartment in Lyon. "I can't do this anymore, I'm sorry." No explanation, no forwarding address, no child support. Just absence where a husband and father should have been. The move to Saint-Rémy had been an act of desperation, disguised as a fresh start. The small Provençal town promised lower rent and a slower pace, but it also meant isolation. Harper's family was back in England, too proud to admit they'd been right about David, too broke to help even if she asked. Her mother's voice still echoed in her mind. "You made your bed, Harper. Now you must lie in it." So she did. She lied in it every night on a mattress that sagged in the middle, in an apartment where the heating barely worked, in a life that felt like treading water in an ocean with no shore in sight. A sleek black car appeared through the curtain of rain, its headlights cutting through the gloom. Harper barely registered it. Rich tourists often passed through Saint-Rémy on their way to more glamorous destinations. But instead of continuing past, the car slowed, then stopped directly in front of the bus stop. The driver's window lowered, revealing a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine Harper could never afford to buy. Dark hair slightly tousled, sharp jawline, and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore a cashmere coat that probably cost more than Harper made in 6 months. "Excuse me," he said in French, though his accent carried hints of international schools and cosmopolitan upbringing. "The bus, it's not coming. There's been an accident on the main road. They're rerouting everything." Harper felt the words like a physical blow. "Are you certain? I heard it on the radio just now. It could be hours before service resumes." His gaze shifted to Emma and Noah, and something flickered across his face. Concern, pity. Harper couldn't tell, and she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Thank you for telling us," she managed, her mind already racing through impossible calculations. Walk to Madame Dubois in the rain. It was 3 kilometers, too far for Noah's little legs. Call a taxi? The cost would eat into money meant for food. Miss work entirely? That wasn't an option. The man didn't drive away. Instead, he seemed to be wrestling with some internal debate, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. Finally, he spoke again. "Where do you need to go?" "That's kind, but please." The word came out sharper than perhaps he'd intended. He softened his tone. "It's pouring. You have children, I have a car, it's just logical." Harper had learned long ago that nothing in life was just logical. Everything came with a price, especially kindness from strangers in expensive cars. But Noah was shivering against her leg, and Emma's lips had taken on a bluish tinge. "Rue de Lavande," Harper heard herself say. "Number 43. And then I need to get to the bakery on Rue de la République. The man nodded and reached across to open the passenger door. Get in, please. Harper hesitated for only a moment before lifting Noah into her arms and guiding Emma toward the car. The interior smelled of leather and something expensive, cologne, or maybe just the scent of a life without financial worry. She buckled the children into the back seat, then slid into the front, acutely aware of how her wet clothes must be staining his pristine upholstery. I'm Lucas, the man said as he pulled back onto the road. Lucas Moore. Harper Martin. She kept her hands folded in her lap, trying to make herself as small as possible. This is Emma and Noah. Hello, Emma. Hello, Noah. Lucas glanced in the rearview mirror, and Harper was surprised to see him smile. Not the polite grimace of someone performing a good deed, but something genuine. That's a fine rabbit you have there. Emma hugged the toy tighter. His name is Monsieur Lapinot. He lost his ear in a battle with the vacuum cleaner. A warrior rabbit. Impressive. The drive to Madame Dubois' house took less than 5 minutes, but it felt like crossing into another dimension. Through the rain-streaked windows, Harper watched her worn-out world slide by, painfully aware of the contrast between her life and the one implied by this car, this man, this moment of unexpected charity. When they arrived, Madame Dubois appeared at her door, her face creased with worry that smoothed into confusion when she saw the expensive vehicle. I'll explain later, Harper promised, helping the children out. She turned back to Lucas. Thank you, truly. I can walk to the bakery from here. Don't be ridiculous, get back in. There was something in his voice, not quite commanding but brook no argument firm, that made Harper obey. She kissed Emma and Noah goodbye, promising to be home by bedtime, and returned to the car. The silence stretched between them as Lucas drove toward the town center. Harper could feel him wanting to say something, could sense questions building behind his composed exterior. Finally he spoke. How long have you been in Saint-Rémy? 3 years. And before that? Lyon. She kept her answers short, hoping he'd take the hint, but Lucas seemed determined to fill the quiet. I grew up near Lyon, he said, in Villefranche-sur-Saône. My father had a factory there. Had, past tense. Harper wondered what story lay behind that word, but she didn't ask. She had no right to his history, and he had no claim to hers. The bakery appeared ahead, its windows glowing warmly despite the grey day. Lucas pulled up to the curb, and Harper reached for the door handle. Thank you again, Monsieur Moore. You've been very kind. Lucas, he corrected. Then, before she could escape, he added, Wait! He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Harper stared at it, as though it might burn her fingers. I don't understand. In case you need anything, a ride, help with the children, whatever. He held the card out, and when she didn't take it, he pressed it into her hand. Please, I mean it. Harper looked down at the embossed letters. Lucas Moore, CEO, Moore Industries, an email address, a phone number. The paper felt heavy, with implications she didn't want to examine. I don't need charity, she said quietly, but without anger. It was simply a fact she needed him to understand. I'm not offering charity. Lucas's grey eyes met hers, and Harper was startled by the intensity she found there. I don't know what I'm offering, but please keep it. She tucked the card into her pocket, though she had no intention of ever using it. I need to go, I'm already late. Harper! The sound of her name in his mouth stopped her. You're a good mother. They're lucky to have you. The words hit her like a wave, unexpected and overwhelming. When was the last time someone had said something like that to her? When had anyone last looked at her life and seen strength instead of failure? Goodbye, Lucas, she managed, and fled into the bakery before the tears could fall. Inside, Madame Rousseau, the bakery owner, looked up from the counter with a frown. You're 15 minutes late, Harper. I'm sorry. The bus... I don't want to hear excuses. This is the 3rd time this month. Madame Rousseau's voice was sharp, tired. She was not a cruel woman, but she was a practical one, and Harper's unreliability was becoming a problem. One more time, and I'll have to let you go. Do you understand? Harper nodded, swallowing the explanations that crowded her throat. She tied on her apron and moved to the back room, where flour dust danced in the air, and the ovens radiated a heat that finally chased away the morning's chill. As she worked, kneading dough, shaping croissants, losing herself in the rhythm of labor, Harper tried not to think about Lucas Moore or the business card that felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket. She tried not to think about how, for just a few minutes in that car, she'd felt seen, not pitied, not judged, just seen. But the card remained, a small rectangle of possibility in a life that had long ago learned not to hope for rescue. 3 days passed before Harper saw Lucas Moore again. 3 days during which she convinced herself that the encounter had been nothing more than what it appeared, a wealthy man performing a random act of kindness on a rainy morning. She'd placed his business card in the drawer of her bedside table, buried beneath unpaid bills, and Emma's drawings of rainbows that never quite reached the ground. The autumn sun had finally broken through the clouds, painting Saint-Remy in shades of gold that almost made Harper forget how cold their apartment had been the night before. She was walking home from the bakery, her body aching from 10 hours of standing, her hands rough from constant washing and hot water. Emma and Noah were with Madame Dubois, probably having dinner by now, bread and cheese, maybe some of the vegetable soup the old woman made stretch across entire weeks. The town square was quiet in the early evening. Most shops already closed, the cafe terraces beginning to fill with locals nursing glasses of wine they made last for hours. Harper kept her head down as she walked, a habit born from not wanting to see the pity in familiar faces. Poor Harper. Abandoned Harper. Harper who'd once been so promising, who'd studied English literature at university, who'd dreamed of teaching or maybe writing. Harper, who now smelled permanently of yeast and wore the same 3 outfits in rotation because that was all she could afford. Harper! The voice made her stop. She turned slowly, already knowing who she'd see, but somehow still unprepared for the sight of him. Lucas stood near the fountain in the center of the square, hands in the pockets of dark jeans that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He wore a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and for a moment Harper was struck by how different he looked from the polished businessman in the car. More human, more real. "Lucas," she managed a smile that felt fragile on her face. "Hello." He crossed the space between them with easy strides, and Harper found herself cataloguing details she hadn't noticed before. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his hair fell slightly over his forehead, the weariness in his eyes that makeup and expensive clothes couldn't quite hide. "I was hoping I might run into you," he said, then laughed softly at himself. "That sounds like a lie. I've been coming to this square every evening for 3 days, hoping to see you." Harper's heart did something complicated in her chest. "Why?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I'm not entirely sure, but I'd like to buy you coffee or dinner, or whatever you'd be willing to accept from a stranger who can't quite explain why he needs to see you again." Every instinct Harper had developed over 3 years of survival screamed at her to say no. She knew how this worked. Wealthy man, struggling woman, the inevitable imbalance that would turn any interaction into something transactional, something that would leave her feeling smaller than she already did. But there was something in Lucas's face that stopped her automatic refusal. He looked lost, not in the way she was lost, not drowning, not desperate, but adrift nonetheless. Like a man who'd forgotten why he'd set out on a journey and now found himself somewhere unexpected. "I need to pick up my children," Harper said carefully. "I'm already late. Let me walk with you." It was phrased as a question, giving her the power to refuse. That simple courtesy, that respect for her agency, made something inside Harper soften. "All right." They fell into step together, and for a long moment neither spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was loaded with all the things they weren't saying. "You must think I'm strange," Lucas finally said. "Appearing out of nowhere, inserting myself into your life. I think you're rich and bored," Harper replied, then immediately wished she could take the words back. But Lucas laughed, a real sound that transformed his entire face. "Fair enough. though I promise I'm not bored. Exhausted, perhaps, confused, but not bored. He paused. May I tell you something true? Harper nodded, curious despite herself. When I saw you at that bus stop, holding your children, protecting them from the rain with your own body. He stopped walking, forcing Harper to stop too. My mother used to do that. Before she died. Before my father's factory collapsed and took everything with it. Before I learned that money is both the easiest and hardest thing to acquire in this world. The confession hung in the air between them. Harper understood suddenly that this wasn't about charity or pity. This was about recognition, about one wounded person seeing their own scars reflected in another. I'm sorry about your mother, Harper said softly, and I'm sorry about whatever brought you to that bus stop. Lucas met her eyes. You don't have to tell me. I'm not asking for your story. I wanted you to know that I see you, not as a project or a problem to solve, just as someone who's fighting to keep standing. Tears pricked at Harper's eyes, but she blinked them back. Why does that matter to you? Because I've spent the last 5 years building an empire, proving to everyone and myself that my father's failure wasn't my destiny. I've made more money than I know what to do with. I've acquired companies, invested in startups, played the game better than almost anyone. He smiled, but it was sad. And I've been utterly, completely alone. By choice, I told myself. But then I saw you, and I realized that somewhere along the way I'd forgotten what real courage looks like. They had reached Madame Dubois' street. Harper could see the warm light in the old woman's window, could imagine Emma and Noah waiting for her. This was the moment to thank Lucas politely and disappear back into her life. Instead, she heard herself say, "Would you like to meet them? My children." Lucas's entire expression shifted. "I would be honored." Madame Dubois' eyebrows nearly disappeared into her hairline when Harper appeared at the door with Lucas in tow. But the old woman was too kind to ask questions. Emma and Noah launched themselves at their mother with the enthusiasm of puppies chattering about their day. How Madame Dubois had let them help make biscuits. How Noah had built a tower from old magazines. How Emma had drawn a picture of a castle. "And who is this?" Emma asked, staring up at Lucas with the frank curiosity of childhood. "This is my friend Lucas," Harper said, testing the word. Friend. Was that what he was? It felt both too small and too presumptuous. "Are you a prince?" Emma asked seriously. "You look like a prince from my storybooks." Lucas crouched down to Emma's level, his expensive jeans touching Madame Dubois' worn carpet. "Not a prince, I'm afraid. Just a regular person." Mama says there's no such thing as regular people," Noah piped up. "She says everyone has magic inside them, even if you can't see it." Harper felt her face flush. She'd forgotten she'd said that. One night when Emma was crying because another child had made fun of her second-hand clothes. Now, hearing her own words reflected back in Lucas's presence, she felt exposed. But Lucas simply nodded solemnly to Noah. "Your mother is very wise. That's absolutely true." After thanking Madame Dubois and promising to bring her the leftover bread from the bakery tomorrow, Harper ushered her children into the cool evening. Their apartment was only 2 blocks away, and she found herself walking slowly, reluctant for this strange interlude to end. Lucas kept pace beside her, asking Emma about her drawing and listening to Noah's rambling story about a caterpillar he'd seen in Madame Dubois' garden. He was good with children, Harper noticed. Not awkward or overly cheerful, but genuinely interested, treating their words with the same respect he'd given hers. When they reached the narrow door that led to the stairs up to Harper's apartment, she stopped. "Thank you for walking with us." "Harper?" Lucas pulled out his phone, hesitating. Could I have your number? I know I'm being forward. I know you have every reason to tell me to leave you alone, but I'd like to see you again, just to talk. He trailed off, seemingly unable to articulate what he wanted. Harper took the phone and typed in her number, her fingers trembling slightly. She told herself she was being practical. It was useful to know wealthy people, wasn't it? But the truth was simpler and more complicated. She wanted to see him again too. I work most days, she said, and the children, I understand. No pressure, just when you have time. If you have time. Lucas smiled, and it transformed his whole face into something vulnerable and hopeful. Good night, Harper. Good night. She watched him walk away, his figure disappearing around the corner before she finally climbed the stairs to her apartment. Emma and Noah were already half asleep on their feet, and Harper went through the familiar bedtime routine on autopilot, washing faces, brushing teeth, reading a story they'd heard 100 times before. After the children were asleep in the bed they all shared, Harper stood at the tiny window that looked out over the quiet street. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for letting me into your world tonight. You have beautiful children. They're lucky to have you. Lee. Harper read the message 3 times, her thumb hovering over the reply button. What did she say to that? How did she explain that no one had made her feel seen, really seen, in years? In the end, she typed, "Thank you for seeing us." 3 dots appeared immediately, showing he was typing. Then, "Would you have dinner with me? Saturday? I can arrange childcare, or we can do something with Emma and Noah, whatever works for you." Saturday. That was 3 days away. 3 days to talk herself out of this, to remember all the reasons why getting involved with someone like Lucas Moore was a terrible idea. 3 days to remember that fairy tales didn't happen to women like her, but she thought of his eyes, of the loneliness she'd recognized there, of the way he'd spoken to her children like they mattered. She thought of how long it had been since she'd had something to look forward to beyond simply surviving another day. "Saturday works," she typed, "but just dinner, and I prefer it without the children, at least this first time. I don't want them getting attached if—" She didn't finish the sentence. "If this doesn't work out, if you disappear like everyone else, if I'm wrong about you." "I understand," Lucas replied. "I'll pick you up at 7. There's a small restaurant I know, quiet, family-owned. Nothing fancy, I promise." Harper smiled despite herself. 7 is perfect. She set her phone down and climbed into bed beside her children, fitting herself into the space between their warm bodies. Emma mumbled something in her sleep and reached for Harper's hand. Noah rolled over, his breath sweet against her shoulder. This was her world. These 2 small humans who needed her, who loved her unconditionally, who thought she hung the moon even when she could barely afford to keep the lights on. Whatever happened with Lucas, she couldn't let it disrupt this fragile ecosystem she'd built. But as she drifted towards sleep, Harper allowed herself a moment of dangerous hope. Maybe, just maybe, letting someone in didn't mean falling apart. Maybe it meant something else entirely. Outside, the stars emerged one by one over the rooftops of Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, bearing witness to new beginnings neither Harper nor Lucas fully understood yet, but both desperately needed. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that seemed designed to mock Harper's anxiety. She'd spent the past 3 days alternating between excitement and terror, between imagining the evening ahead and convincing herself to cancel. Twice she'd drafted text messages to Lucas, elaborate apologies explaining why dinner was impossible. Twice she'd deleted them without sending. Now, standing in front of the cracked mirror in her bathroom, Harper barely recognized the woman staring back at her. She'd borrowed a dress from Colette, the younger baker at the shop, a simple navy blue sheath that actually fit properly. She'd washed her hair twice, using the expensive shampoo she saved for special occasions. She'd even applied makeup, just a little, careful not to look like she was trying too hard. "Mama, you look like a princess," Emma declared from the doorway, her eyes wide with approval. "A very nervous princess," Harper muttered, adjusting the dress for the 100th time. It felt strange to wear something that wasn't stained with flour or worn thin from too many washes. Madame Dubois had agreed to watch the children overnight, refusing Harper's attempts to pay her. "You deserve an evening, ma chérie," the old woman had said firmly. "And these little ones will be perfectly fine with me. We'll make popcorn and watch that animated film about the fish. Everyone will be happy." Now, with 7 o'clock approaching, Harper felt her stomach twist into knots. What was she doing? She didn't date. She didn't have time for romance, didn't have the emotional energy to invest in something that would inevitably fall apart. Her life was about survival, about making sure Emma and Noah had what they needed, about keeping her head above water. But then she thought of Lucas's text messages over the past 3 days. Nothing pushy or inappropriate, just small observations about his day, questions about hers, recommendations for children's books he remembered from his own childhood. There was a gentleness to their communication that made Harper feel like she was rediscovering a part of herself she'd buried years ago. At exactly 7 o'clock, her phone buzzed. "I'm outside. No rush. Take your time." Harper kissed Emma and Noah goodbye, ignoring the lump in her throat. They looked so small, so trusting, watching her from Madame Dubois' doorway. "Be good," she whispered. "I'll see you tomorrow morning." Lucas was waiting beside his car, but he'd clearly taken her words about nothing fancy to heart. He wore dark jeans and a simple grey sweater, his hair slightly tousled by the evening breeze. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that seemed to bypass all of Harper's defenses. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "You don't have to—" Harper started, then stopped herself. Why was it so hard to accept a compliment? "Thank you. You look nice too." The drive took them out of Saint-Rémy, following winding roads through lavender fields that had long since been harvested. Lucas had been right. The restaurant wasn't fancy. It was a converted farmhouse on the outskirts of a village even smaller than Saint-Rémy, with only 6 tables and a menu handwritten on a chalkboard. "My mother used to bring me here," Lucas explained, as they were seated at a corner table with a view of the darkening hills. "When I was young, before everything fell apart. The owners are the same, Pierre and Isabelle Laurent. They still cook together, still argue about whether to add more garlic to the ratatouille." The intimacy of the setting, the weight of Lucas's memory, made Harper's chest tighten. "This must be hard for you, coming back here." "It is," Lucas admitted, "but it's also necessary. I've spent 5 years running from anything that reminded me of who I was before I became successful. I thought that's what moving forward meant, leaving everything behind." He met her eyes across the table. "But lately I've been wondering if I've just been running in circles." Before Harper could respond, Isabelle Laurent appeared, a woman in her 60s with flour on her apron and warmth in her eyes. "Lucas! Mon Dieu, look at you, all grown up and so handsome." She pulled him into a hug, then turned her sharp gaze to Harper. "And who is this lovely young woman?" "This is Harper," Lucas said, and Harper noticed he didn't try to define their relationship. "Harper, this is Isabelle, who taught me everything I know about proper bread making, which apparently you forgot since you went into business instead of baking." Isabelle scolded affectionately. She turned to Harper. "I remember when this one was just a boy, always in the kitchen, stealing warm bread when he thought we weren't looking. His mother would sit right at that table there, reading her books, patient as anything, while Pierre and I fed her son." Harper saw Lucas's expression shift, something vulnerable crossing his face. "I haven't been back in almost 15 years, he said quietly. "I should have visited sooner." "You're here now," Isabelle said firmly. "That's what matters. Now let me feed you both properly. You look like you need a good meal, both of you." As Isabelle disappeared into the kitchen, Harper leaned forward. "You really haven't been back since my father's factory closed, since we lost everything, since my mother died from the stress and grief of it all." Lucas's voice was matter-of-fact, but Harper could hear the pain beneath. "After she was gone, my father essentially gave up. I was 19, in my first year of business school on scholarship. I swore I'd never be poor again, never be powerless again. So I worked, I studied, I invested every euro I earned. I built more industries from nothing but anger and determination." "That must have been lonely," Harper said softly. "It was. It is." Lucas paused as Pierre appeared with wine. "A local vintage," he explained, "nothing fancy but honest, and 2 glasses of water." When they were alone again, Lucas continued, "I've had relationships, brief ones, but I never let anyone close enough to matter. I told myself it was because I was too busy, too focused. But the truth is, I was terrified. Of what? Of caring about someone enough that losing them would destroy me the way losing my mother destroyed my father. He said it simply, as though confessing something he'd just realized himself. So I built walls, made money my purpose, convinced myself that success was enough. Harper understood that impulse more than she wanted to admit. When David left, she found herself saying, I promised myself I'd never depend on anyone again, that I'd be strong enough, good enough, capable enough to do everything alone. She laughed without humor. And I have been. I've kept my children fed and housed and loved. But God, Lucas, I'm so tired. The confession hung between them, more intimate than any touch could be. Lucas reached across the table, not quite taking her hand, but letting his fingers rest near hers, close enough to be an offer, far enough to be refused. You're the strongest person I've met in years, he said. But strength doesn't mean doing everything alone. I'm still learning that. Their food arrived, simple, perfect dishes that tasted like memory and comfort. As they ate, the conversation shifted to easier topics. Lucas told her about the absurdity of board meetings, about the venture capitalists who thought they were geniuses, about the small bookstore he'd secretly invested in because the owner reminded him of his mother. Harper talked about Emma's determination to read every book in Madame Dubois' small collection, about Noah's obsession with bugs, about the regular customer at the bakery who insisted on paying in poetry. He actually pays in poetry? Lucas asked, delighted. Well, no, Madame Rousseau makes him pay in euros too, but he always leaves a poem on a napkin. They're terrible, truly awful, but there's something sweet about it. Harper smiled. I keep them. I have a whole box of terrible poetry about croissants and the meaning of life. I'd like to read them someday, Lucas said, and Harper realized he meant it. Dessert was a simple tarte tatin, the caramelized apples gleaming in the candlelight. As they shared it, one plate, two forks, Harper felt something inside her begin to thaw. This wasn't just attraction, though she couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach when Lucas smiled. This was recognition. Two people who'd learned to protect themselves from life, discovering that maybe, just maybe, protection wasn't the same as living. I need to tell you something, Harper said, as they drove back towards Saint-Rémy. The wine had given her courage, or perhaps it was simply time to be honest. I'm afraid of this, of you, of what it might mean. I'm afraid too, Lucas admitted. I keep waiting for you to realize that I'm not, that I don't know how to do this, how to be close to someone, how to be vulnerable. We could learn together, Harper heard herself suggest, slowly, no expectations, just seeing what happens. Lucas pulled the car to the side of the road, right at the overlook where the lights of Saint-Rémy twinkled in the valley below. He turned to face her, and in the dim light Harper saw hope and fear warring in his expression. I want that, he said, more than I've wanted anything in years. But Harper, I need you to know, I'm not trying to rescue you. I'm not trying to solve your problems with money or connections or anything else. I just want to know you, to be known by you. Then know this, Harper said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I'm broken in places that might never fully heal. I have 2 children who will always come first. I work too much and worry constantly, and sometimes I'm so tired I can barely speak. I can't promise you easy or simple or uncomplicated. I don't want easy, Lucas replied. He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I've had easy. Easy is lonely. I want real. In that moment, sitting in a car overlooking a small French town, Harper made a choice. She chose to risk. She chose to hope. She chose to believe that maybe, just maybe, love wasn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone willing to grow alongside you. Okay, she whispered. Let's try real. Lucas's smile was like sunrise, slow, warm, inevitable. Okay. They sat there for a long moment, neither speaking, both understanding that something had shifted between them. something fragile and precious and terrifying. Finally, Lucas started the car again. "I should get you home. Emma and Noah will be wondering about their mother." "They're with Madame Dubois until tomorrow morning," Harper said, then hesitated. "But yes, home is good." When they arrived at her apartment building, Lucas walked her to the door. The street was quiet, lit by a single lamp that cast everything in soft shadows. "Thank you," Harper said, "for dinner, for listening, for being honest. Thank you for giving me a chance." Lucas leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. Nothing more, respecting the boundaries they were still learning to navigate. "Sleep well, Harper." As she climbed the stairs to her empty apartment, Harper felt lighter than she had in years. The place looked different somehow, still worn, still shabby, but not quite as bleak. She changed into her nightgown and climbed into the bed that suddenly seemed too big without Emma and Noah's warm bodies beside her. Her phone buzzed one last time. "Tonight was perfect. Thank you for letting me in. Sweet dreams." Harper typed back, "Thank you for being patient with me. Good night, Lucas." She set her phone aside and stared at the ceiling, where water stains formed constellations she'd memorized over 3 years of sleepless nights. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Harper fell asleep, smiling, hope blooming in her chest like spring after an endless winter. The next 6 weeks unfolded like a dream Harper was afraid to wake from. Lucas became woven into the fabric of her days in ways both small and profound. He would appear at the bakery at closing time, offering to walk her home. He brought books for Emma and plastic dinosaurs for Noah, never expensive gifts, but thoughtful ones that showed he'd been paying attention. He fixed the loose hinge on Harper's apartment door without being asked, and when she protested, he simply smiled and said, "Let me help, please." But it wasn't all effortless. There were moments when Harper's walls would slam back up, when Lucas offered to pay for winter coats for the children, and she'd refused so sharply that he'd stepped back, hurt flashing across his face. There were evenings when his phone would ring with business emergencies, and she'd see him transform back into the CEO he'd been before, distant and unreachable, and she'd remember that their worlds were fundamentally different. Still, they tried. They talked late into the night, Lucas calling after Emma and Noah were asleep, his voice a lifeline through the darkness. They stole hours together when Harper wasn't working, walking through the autumn markets, sitting in cafes, where Lucas would work on his laptop, while Harper read books she'd borrowed from the library. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Then, on a grey November morning, everything changed. Harper was at the bakery, elbow deep in dough, when Madame Rousseau emerged from her office with a grave expression. "Harper, I need to speak with you." The words sent ice through Harper's veins. She washed her hands and followed her employer into the cramped office that smelled of old paper and vanilla extract. "I'm selling the bakery," Madame Rousseau said without preamble. "My daughter in Paris, she's sick. Cancer. I need to be with her, and I can't run this place from there." Harper's world tilted. "When?" "The sale closes at the end of December. The new owners, they're a chain. Modern, efficient. They're bringing their own staff." Madame Rousseau's voice softened. "I'm sorry, Harper, truly. I tried to negotiate positions for my employees, but they refused. You have 6 weeks, then." Then she would have nothing. No job, no income. No way to pay the rent that was already stretching her too thin. Harper nodded mechanically, thanked Madame Rousseau for her honesty, and returned to her work. Her hands shaped croissants on autopilot, while her mind spun through impossible calculations. She couldn't tell Lucas. The thought came immediately, sharp and clear. If she told him, he would try to fix it, offer her money, buy the bakery himself, solve her problems the way wealthy people could. And then what would they be? Not equals, not partners, just another rich man rescuing another poor woman. The imbalance poisoning everything between them, but keeping secrets felt like betrayal too. Harper made it through her shift in a daze. When Lucas texted asking if she wanted company for the walk home, she declined, claiming exhaustion. It was true enough. She was exhausted, bone-deep and soul-tired, the brief respite of hope over the past weeks crumbling back into familiar despair. At home she held Emma and Noah extra tight, breathing in their little kid smell of soap and innocence. They had no idea their world was about to shatter again, no idea that their mother was about to fail them one more time. "Mama, why are you sad?" Emma asked, her small hand touching Harper's cheek. "Just tired, my love, just very tired." That night, after the children were asleep, Harper pulled out the folder she kept hidden beneath her mattress. Inside were the papers she'd been avoiding for months. Notices from the landlord about overdue rent, letters from debt collectors, the final demands she'd been shuffling and juggling like a circus act. Without the bakery job, the whole house of cards would collapse. Her phone rang. Lucas. Harper stared at his name on the screen, her thumb hovering over the answer button. She let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text. "Are you okay? You seemed off today. I'm here if you need to talk." Harper set the phone face down and pressed her palms against her eyes. She couldn't do this. Couldn't keep pretending that a relationship with Lucas was sustainable when their realities were so vastly different. He lived in a world where problems could be solved with money and connections. She lived in a world where missing a single paycheck meant choosing between food and heat. 3 days passed in a fog of avoidance. Harper threw herself into work, taking extra shifts, volunteering for the early morning prep that no one else wanted. She responded to Lucas's messages with brief, polite texts that said nothing real. She could feel him pulling away in response, confused and hurt, and hated herself for it but didn't know how to stop. On the 4th day, Lucas simply appeared at the bakery during Harper's lunch break. He looked tired, his usual composure frayed at the edges. "What's wrong?" he asked without preamble. "And please don't tell me nothing. I know something's changed." They stood in the alley behind the bakery, surrounded by the smell of garbage bins and yesterday's bread. Not romantic, not suitable for the conversation they needed to have, but perhaps that was fitting. "The bakery's being sold," Harper heard herself say. "I'm losing my job at the end of December, and before you say anything, before you offer to fix it, I need you to understand something." She took a breath. "I can't be with someone who solves my problems for me. I can't be someone's project or charity case. I need to figure this out myself." Lucas's jaw tightened. "Is that really what you think I see you as? A project? No. Maybe. I don't know." Harper wrapped her arms around herself. "Lucas, look at us. Really look. You drive a car worth more than I'll earn in 5 years. You own companies. You have options and opportunities I can't even imagine. And I'm about to be unemployed with 2 children and debts I can't pay. How is that supposed to work?" "It works if we want it to work," Lucas said, his voice rising with frustration. "It works if we're honest with each other instead of you shutting me out at the first sign of trouble." "This isn't trouble, Lucas. This is my life. This is what being with me means. Constant crisis, constant worry, never knowing if we'll make it through another month." Harper felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. "You deserve better than this." "Don't tell me what I deserve." Lucas stepped closer, and Harper could see anger and hurt warring in his expression. "Don't make decisions for both of us because you're scared." "Of course I'm scared. You think I'm not terrified of losing you, of watching you realize that this," she gestured between them, "is too hard, too complicated, not worth the effort." Is that what happened with David? He left because things got hard. The question landed like a slap. Harper stepped back, her breath catching. "That's not fair." "Maybe not, but neither is pushing me away before I've even had a chance to prove I'm not him." Lucas's voice softened. "Harper, I'm not going anywhere. Not because of money or logistics or any of the practical problems you're listing. The only thing that will make me leave is you asking me to. Is that what you want?" Harper stared at him, at this man who had somehow become essential to her in just 6 weeks, this person who had reminded her what hope felt like. She thought of Emma and Noah, who lit up when Lucas visited. She thought of the conversations that made her feel seen for the first time in years. She thought of how much easier it would be to simply walk away now before she fell any deeper. before the inevitable crash hurt even more. But she also thought of what she'd told him at the Overlook. Let's try real. Real meant not running at the first obstacle. Real meant trusting someone with the messy, difficult truth. I'm losing the apartment too, she said quietly. I'm 3 months behind on rent. Without a job, I have maybe 2 weeks before eviction proceedings start. I have nowhere to go except back to England, to my family who will say they told me so, who will make me feel like the failure I already know I am. Lucas absorbed this information without flinching. Okay, that's a problem. Problems have solutions. Not ones I'm willing to accept, Harper said. I won't let you pay my rent, or buy me an apartment, or any of the obvious things you're thinking. I wasn't thinking that. Lucas ran a hand through his hair. Well, I was. But I know you'd refuse. What I'm actually thinking is much more complicated and probably crazy, but hear me out. He pulled out his phone and showed Harper a listing. It was a building, an old, clearly neglected building on Rue des Lauriers, one of the less fashionable streets in Saint-Rémy. I bought this 2 weeks ago. It was an investment property that came up at auction. The previous owner ran it as a boarding house, but it's been vacant for years. Harper frowned. I don't understand. The ground floor is a perfect space for a bakery. Small, but perfect. The upper floors are apartments, 4 of them, all needing renovation. Lucas spoke quickly, as though afraid she'd interrupt. I've been trying to figure out what to do with it, but now I'm thinking, what if you opened your own bakery? What if you rented one of the apartments at an actually reasonable rate and earned your way by building something of your own? Harper's heart hammered in her chest. Lucas, before you say no, let me finish. This isn't charity. This is a business proposition. You have skills, experience, and from what I've tasted, you make incredible bread. I have a building that's currently generating no income. You rent the space at market rate, a real rate, with a real lease. You build the business. If it fails, and we deal with that. But at least you're not starting from scratch with nothing. It was too much, too generous, too risky. Harper could think of 100 reasons to refuse, but underneath all the fear and pride, a small voice whispered, "What if? I can't afford to rent a commercial space, even at market rate," Harper said. "Not with startup costs and inventory and equipment. So we structure it differently. You pay reduced rent for the first year while you build clientele, then it increases to market rate. Or you give me a small percentage of profits instead of fixed rent." Lucas held up his hands. "I'm not a baker, Harper. I don't know the details, but I know numbers and I know business. We can make this work if you want it to work." Harper looked at him, really looked, and saw not a wealthy man trying to buy his way into her life, but someone offering a hand up, not a handout. The distinction mattered. It mattered enormously. "I'd want it in writing," she said slowly. "A real contract, real terms, nothing given out of pity or obligation." "Absolutely. My lawyer will draw up whatever you need." Lucas's eyes brightened with hope. "Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe," Harper corrected. "I need to see the space. I need to understand what I'd be getting into. I need to make sure this is actually viable, and not just you being impossibly kind. Fair enough? Can I show you tomorrow?" Harper nodded, her mind already spinning with possibilities and pitfalls. Tomorrow. They stood in that grimy alley, and suddenly Lucas was pulling her into a hug. Harper stiffened for a moment, then melted into it, letting herself be held, letting herself be comforted. When was the last time someone had simply held her? When had she last allowed herself to be vulnerable enough to need it? "I'm still scared," she whispered against his shoulder. "Me too," Lucas admitted, "but I'd rather be scared together than safe and alone." As Harper walked home that evening, something had shifted inside her. Not the weight disappearing, that would take time, work, probably years, but the weight becoming bearable because she wasn't carrying it alone anymore. That night, she told Emma and Noah that things were going to change, that Mama might be starting a new job, a new adventure. She watched their faces light up with the resilience of children, their ability to trust that adults would figure things out. Harper hoped desperately that she wouldn't let them down. But for the first time in 3 years, she believed she might actually have a chance to build something better. Not because someone was rescuing her, but because someone believed in her enough to give her the tools to rescue herself. 6 months later, Harper stood in the doorway of her bakery, and marveled at how much could change when you finally allowed yourself to hope. Harper's Hearth, read the hand-painted sign above the door, Emma's careful lettering preserved by a professional who'd added flourishes and warmth. Through the window, the morning sun illuminated shelves lined with bread that Harper had baked herself, each loaf a small act of defiance against everything that had tried to break her. The grand opening was set for 9 o'clock. It was just past 7, and Harper had been here since 4 in the morning, making final preparations. The smell of fresh bread filled the space. Honey wheat, rosemary focaccia, the chocolate croissants that had become her signature during the trial runs. Her hands ached in the familiar way, but it was a good ache, an earned ache. Behind her, Lucas appeared carrying 2 cups of coffee. He'd been there since 5, helping despite his complete lack of baking knowledge, mostly just being present while Harper worked through her nervous energy. "The bread is perfect," he said, handing her a cup. "Stop obsessing." "I'm not obsessing, I'm quality controlling." Harper took a sip, grateful for the warmth. "What if no one comes?" "Then we'll eat very well for the next month." Lucas smiled. "But they'll come. The whole town has been talking about this for weeks." It was true. Saint-Remy had embraced Harper's Hearth with an enthusiasm that still surprised Harper. Part of it was the novelty. A new business in a small town was always news, but part of it was something else. People had watched Harper struggle for 3 years. They'd seen her at that bus stop in the rain, seen her working double shifts, seen her fighting to keep her family afloat. This felt like a victory for all of them, proof that sometimes the underdog actually wins. The space itself had transformed beyond Harper's wildest imaginings. Lucas had honored his word. The contract between them was legitimate, negotiated by lawyers, with terms that were challenging but fair. Harper paid reduced rent for the first year, with a percentage of profits going to Lucas, then transitioning to market rate. She'd used her small savings and a microloan from a program Lucas had connected her with to buy equipment and initial inventory. Every euro spent had been carefully calculated, every decision hers to make. The apartment upstairs had become their home, hers, Emma's and Noah's. It was small but warm, with actual heating and windows that didn't leak. Emma had her own room for the first time in her life, walls painted lavender at her insistence. Noah shared a room with Harper, but it was bigger than the space they'd all squeezed into before, and he had a shelf for his growing collection of bug books that Lucas kept mysteriously appearing with. "You should go get ready," Lucas said gently. "Colette will be here any minute to help with the opening rush." Colette had left Madame Rousseau's bakery to work with Harper, a leap of faith that still made Harper's throat tight with gratitude. The younger woman had believed in Harper's vision, had contributed ideas and energy that made everything better. Harper went upstairs to change. Emma and Noah were still asleep, watched over by Madame Dubois, who now lived in one of the other renovated apartments at a rate she could actually afford. The building had become a small community. The other 2 apartments housed a young artist and a retired teacher, all of them connected by Lucas's unconventional approach to landlording and Harper's tendency to share bread with anyone who looked hungry. Standing in front of her mirror, Harper barely recognized herself, not because she looked so different, though the stress lines around her eyes had softened and there was color in her cheeks again, but because of what she saw in her own eyes. Strength, yes. She'd always had that. But now there was something else. Hope, contentment, the quiet confidence of someone who had faced her worst fears and survived. A knock on the door interrupted her reflection. "It's me," Lucas called. Harper opened it to find him holding a box wrapped in simple brown paper. "What's this?" "Something I wanted to give you before the chaos starts." He looked almost shy. This man who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-euro deals. "Open it." Inside was a journal, leather-bound and beautiful, the kind Harper would never have bought for herself. On the first page, in Lucas's distinctive handwriting, were words that made her eyes blur with tears. For Harper, who taught me that real courage isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up again and again until you finally learn to fly. All my love, always, L. Lucas, she whispered. I know we haven't said it yet, he said softly, stepping into her apartment and closing the door behind him. I know we've been taking things slow, being careful, but Harper, I love you. I love your strength and your stubbornness, and the way you fight for every small victory. I love how you are with your children. I love who I am when I'm with you, more real, more human, more myself than I've been in years. Harper set the journal down carefully, her hands trembling. I love you too. I've been afraid to say it, afraid that saying it out loud would somehow break the spell, but I do. I love you. They came together in a kiss that was both gentle and intense, a promise and a celebration. When they finally broke apart, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. I want this, he said, all of it. The chaos and the late nights and the worrying about whether there's enough flour. I want to build a life with you, Harper. Not me fixing your problems or you fitting into my world, but something new that we create together. I want that too, Harper admitted. But Lucas, I need you to understand. It won't always be easy. I'm still going to be stubborn. I'm still going to refuse help when I shouldn't. I'm still going to wake up some mornings terrified that this is all going to fall apart. And I'm going to work too much sometimes, Lucas countered. I'm going to retreat into spreadsheets when emotions get too intense. I'm going to mess up with the kids because I have no idea what I'm doing. He smiled. We're both disasters, Harper. But maybe we're disasters who are better together. A sound from the bedroom interrupted them, Noah calling for water. Harper laughed, the spell of the moment broken but not lost. Welcome to the reality of loving someone with children. I wouldn't have it any other way. They went to Noah together, and Harper watched Lucas pour a glass of water with the same care he brought to everything, watched him smooth back her son's hair with a tenderness that made her heart ache. This man who had learned to love her children as his own, not as obstacles to overcome, but as gifts to cherish. At 8:30, Harper returned downstairs to find a line already forming outside. Her heart lurched. Colette was there, beaming. Madame Dubois held Emma and Noah by the hands, both children practically vibrating with excitement. Pierre and Isabelle Laurent from the farmhouse restaurant had driven in, along with other familiar faces from around town. At exactly 9 o'clock, Harper unlocked the door. The rush that followed was beautiful chaos. Orders shouted, bread wrapped, the register chiming continuously. Lucas worked the counter alongside Colette, learning on the fly, making mistakes that customers found charming. Emma and Noah sat in the corner coloring pictures to hang on the walls, occasionally helping by delivering napkins to tables. By noon, they'd sold out of almost everything. Harper stood amid the empty shelves, exhausted and exhilarated and slightly disbelieving. You did it, Lucas said, pulling her into a hug, despite the flour covering them both. We did it, Harper corrected. She looked around at the space they'd created together, not Lucas's money and not just her sweat, but a true collaboration. Lucas, I need to tell you something. Anything. When you found me at that bus stop 6 months ago, I was about to give up. Not on my children, never on them, but on myself. On the possibility that life could be anything more than just surviving. She touched his face, seeing her own wonder reflected in his eyes. You didn't save me, but you reminded me that I was worth saving. That's the real gift you gave me. You did the same for me, Lucas said quietly. I had everything and nothing. You showed me what actually matters. That evening, after the bakery was cleaned and closed, after Emma and Noah were asleep upstairs, Harper and Lucas sat on the front step of the building, watching the stars emerge over Saint-Remy. The street was quiet, the day's excitement settling into contentment. What happens now? Harper asked. Now we keep going, one day at a time, building this business, building this life. Lucas took her hand. Harper Martin, I don't have a ring yet, and this isn't the romantic proposal you deserve, but I need you to know my intentions. When you're ready, in a year or 5 years or whenever, I want to marry you. I want to be a father to Emma and Noah. I want to wake up every morning to the smell of bread and the sound of your voice. I want all the messy, beautiful, complicated reality of a life with you. Harper felt tears stream down her face, but they were good tears, healing tears. Ask me again when you have the ring, and when I've had time to really believe this is real. But Lucas, the answer is going to be yes. They sat there as the night deepened. Two people who had found each other in the rain, who had chosen to trust despite every reason not to, who had learned that love wasn't about perfection or rescue or fairy tale endings. It was about showing up, about being honest, about believing that two broken people could heal together. Inside, the bakery waited for tomorrow's bread. Upstairs, Emma and Noah dreamed their innocent dreams. And on that step, Harper Martin and Lucas Moore held each other and looked toward a future that finally felt full of promise instead of just survival. The journey hadn't been easy. There would still be hard days ahead. Financial stress, moments of doubt, the constant juggling of work and family and relationship, but they would face it together, and that made all the difference. Harper thought back to the woman she'd been that rainy morning at the bus stop, desperate, alone, barely holding on. She wanted to go back and tell that woman, hold on, help is coming, love is coming, not in the form you expect, but in exactly the form you need, and most importantly, you are stronger than you know. You are worthy of good things. You are enough. What are you thinking? Lucas asked softly. Harper smiled. That I'm grateful, that I'm happy, that this, she gestured to the bakery, the building, the quiet street. This is everything I never knew I needed. Me too, Lucas said. He kissed her temple. Me too. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human struggle and human triumph. But here, on this small street in this small town, two people had found something worth fighting for. They had learned that real love doesn't erase pain. It transforms it into something beautiful. They had discovered that happy endings aren't about having perfect lives, but about finding someone to weather the imperfect ones with. And in the morning, Harper would wake early and begin again, baking bread, building dreams, creating a life of substance and meaning, with Lucas by her side, with her children's laughter filling the spaces that had once echoed with loneliness, with the quiet certainty that she had finally found her way home. The bus stop where it all began was just 3 streets away. Sometimes on her morning walks, Harper would pass it and remember, but she didn't stop there anymore. She had somewhere better to be. She had a bakery to run, a love to nurture, a family to build, a future to embrace. She had learned at last how to hope, and that, in the end, was the greatest gift of all. The end.